Okay, a projectile is an object upon which the only force acting is gravity. Then many projectiles not only undergo a vertical motion but also undergo a horizontal motion. That is why as they move upward or downward, they are also moving horizontally. Remember, there are two components of the projectile's motion, horizontal and vertical. And they are in perpendicular components, meaning they are independent of each other. That is why we are going to discuss them separately. In our diagram, we can see that with gravity, the projectile will fall below its inertial path. Okay? Gravity acts downward to cause a downward acceleration. There are no horizontal forces needed to maintain the horizontal motion. Instead, it is consistent with the concept of inertia. Pag sinabing vertical, okay, ito yun. Vertical, pababa. Okay? Pag sinabing horizontal, okay, ito yun. And take note, vertical, anong cause ng vertical acceleration dito? Due to the gravity or the downward acceleration. Bakit meron tayong sinasabing horizontal motion? Dahil din sa ating concept ng inertia. Itong part is sinasabing parabolic trajectory or the projectile path. Okay, so we are now in the horizontally launched projectiles. Imagine a cannonball being launched from a cannon atop a very high cliff. Imagine as well that the cannonball does not encounter a significant amount of air resistance. So, assuming wala ni siya air resistance. Okay, now the question is, what will be the path of the cannonball and how can the motion of the cannonball be described? Now, try to analyze in our GIF that the path of the cannonball is shown. Additionally, the horizontal, and the vertical velocity components are represented by arrows in the animation. Okay, next. If you can observe in our animation, okay, it shows or it follows a parabolic path. Kita mo, ana? Okay, very good. Now, as the cannonball falls, it undergoes a downward acceleration. So, meron siyang downward acceleration. Why? It is because it's said to have a downward acceleration due to the gravity or force of gravity. As it downward moving, okay, yung bola natin, it gains speed. So, pakusog siya, papaspas. We're going to check our velocity here. Naga-change, diba? From 0, 30, 40, until 120 meters per second. In the animation, the downward acceleration is depicted by a change. So, merong changes sa ating vertical. Then, it is caused by the force of gravity. Now, if you can observe, yung Vx natin, it's constant. Okay? Wala siya nag-change. Only the vertical component. If the ball's motion can be approximated as projectile's motion, that is, the influence of air resistance can be assumed, then there will be no horizontal acceleration. In the absence of horizontal forces, there will be a constant velocity in the horizontal direction. That is why constant lang yung ating velocity sa ating horizontal direction. Okay? Then there will be no horizontal acceleration. Then, if you can observe, the horizontal velocity component remains the same. Okay? It's just the same. Wala'y nag-change throughout the entire motion of the cannonball. Now, if we're going to insist that there is a horizontal force acting upon the cannonball, since it is moving horizontally, okay, yet this is simply not the case because the horizontal motion of the cannon is the result of inertia. Okay, kaya na ay, okay, tinatawag na itong inertia. When launched from the cannonball already possessed a horizontal motion and thus will maintain the state of horizontal motion unless acted upon the horizontal force. Okay, ito yung ating motion na ginadescribe ni Newton from the first law. It reminds us that forces are not required for an object to be moving once in motion. The presence of forces will only serve to accelerate such objects. Okay, so we have here a diagram shows that gravity accelerates objects downward but is unable to effect the horizontal motion of a projectile. But why? Okay, remember, in the absence of gravity, the cannonball will continue its horizontal motion at a constant velocity. Constant means walang nag-change. It is because it is consistent with the law of inertia. Furthermore, it merely dropped from rest in the presence of gravity. The cannonball would accelerate downward and gaining speed at a rate of 9.8 meter per second every second. Now, this is consistent with our conception of free-falling objects accelerating at a rate known as the acceleration of gravity. Okay, now we project that the cannonball horizontally in the presence of gravity. Then the cannonball will maintain the same horizontal motion. That is constant horizontal velocity. So constant, walay nag-usab. The force of gravity will act upon the cannonball to cause the same vertical motion. So this is our horizontal, ito yung pababa natin, and that is our vertical. Okay? The cannonball falls the same amount of distance as it did when it was merely dropped from rest. Okay? However, the presence of gravity, so namatay na tawag na gravity, okay? It does not affect the horizontal motion of the projectile. So, ito yung si vertical, ito yung si horizontal. Si gravity, dili maapektuhan ang motion ni horizontal. The force of gravity acts downward and it is unable to alter the horizontal motion. There must be a horizontal force to cause a horizontal acceleration. So, unsay nakapa, what do you call this? Accelerates ato ang horizontal motion. Okay? Again, this is, as we all know, it is caused by the inertia. And we know that there is only a vertical force acting upon projectiles. This vertical force, saan makikita sa vertical force? Okay, pababa. Okay? It acts perpendicular to the horizontal. Perpendicular, di ba sa math, ganyan. Perpendicular. Ito yung sinasabi perpendicular. It means it will not affect since it is perpendicular components of motion and they are independent. So, iba si vertical, iba din si horizontal. Thus, remember, the projectile travels with a constant horizontal, and a downward vertical acceleration. Okay. Okay, so we are now in the non-horizontal or non-horizontally launched projectiles. In our GIF, try to imagine a cannonball being launched at an angle from a cannon atop a very high cliff. And try also to imagine that it does not encounter a significant amount of air resistance. Now the question is, what would be the path of the cannonball and how could the motion of the cannonball be described? In this animation, the path of the cannonball is shown. Additionally, the horizontal and vertical velocity components are represented by arrows in the animation. Okay, as you can see in our animation, the cannonball follows a parabolic path. Asa diri ang parabolic path? Okay, try na to ni siya o follow. Ayan, and then, very good. That is our parabolic path. Now, as the cannonball rises, pasaka, towards its tip, it undergoes a downward acceleration. Pag musaka na daw ni siya, kita niyo ni, na-follow niyo ni, okay, it will undergo now a downward acceleration. An upwardly moving cannonball which is slowing down. Basta mo pasaka gani na siya, iyang velocity is nagahinay-hinay, daga-decrease, okay? Antod ang yahang, what they call that, peak niya is may mong 0. And then, it will go or undergoing a downward acceleration. Downward acceleration is what? Okay? Is influenced by gravity. As a cannonball falls, it still undergoes a downward acceleration. Pag naka-downward moving na si cannonball, anong mangyayari sa kanyang speed? Very good. It is gaining speed. That is why makita ninyo ang atuang vertical motion component, okay, from 60-50 until nag-increase siya. But why is it is negative? Negative shows the downward, okay, sign convention ng ating downward force, that is the gravity. Okay, the downward acceleration is depicted by a change in vertical component of a velocity. This downward acceleration is caused by a downward force of gravity that acts upon the ball. In the absence, okay, in the absence of the horizontal forces, there will be a constant velocity in the horizontal direction. That is why, in our Vx, it is equal to 60 meters per second. Okay, this is depicted that the fact of the horizontal velocity components remain the same size throughout the entire motion of the cannonball. So, si Vx wala nag-usab. Si Vy, okay, nag-increase due to its downward acceleration. Okay, now, many of you will insist that there is a horizontal force acting upon the cannonball since it is moving horizontally. But that is not the case. It is result of its own inertia. Take note that the cannonball will only maintain this state of horizontal motion unless acted upon by a horizontal force. This is familiar to you is because of its Newton's first law, that an object in motion will continue in motion with the same speed and in the same direction. Take note that forces are not required for an object to be moving. Once in motion, the presence of forces will only serve to accelerate such objects. Okay, so in this part, we have here two given figures. First figure is what? Shows that in the absence of gravity, the cannonball follows a straight line path that is consistent with the Newton's law of inertia. Okay, saan yung path natin? Yan, straight lang yan. But in the other figure, we can see the two motion. We have here, pasaka siya, okay, and then pababa. And then if you can observe, meron tayo tinatawag dyan, two dimensions. We have the vertical and we have the horizontal. Okay? Then if you can observe, we have here a parabolic trajectory resulting from the gravity's influence. Ito yung trajectory natin. Okay? Next. Now, suppose that our cannon is aimed upward. Ito yung aimed upward and shot an angle to the horizontal from the same cliff. Okay, meron siyang angle na na-create. Again, in the absence of gravity, okay, the projectile would again travel along a straight line or yung sinasabi nating inertial path. Okay, ito yung part na gravity-free path. An object in motion will continue in motion at a constant speed in the same direction if there is no unbalanced force. That speaks all about our first law of motion. That is also the same case for an object moving through a space in the absence of gravity. However, if the gravity switch could be turned on such that the cannonball is truly a projectile, then the object would once more free fall below this straight line inertial path. In fact, that the projectile would travel with a parabolic trajectory. So, isa lang din niya itong timanan na si ato ang projectile makakreate siya of a parabolic path or parabolic trajectory. Okay? the downward force of gravity would act upon the cannonball that caused the same vertical motion as before a downward acceleration. The cannonball falls the same amount of distance in every second as it did when it was merely dropped from rest. Again, the presence of gravity, yung gravity, downward acceleration, does not affect the horizontal motion. So, walang kinalaman dito si ating horizontal and the vertical. The projectile still moves the same horizontal distance in each second of travels as it did when the gravity switch was turned off. Remember that the force of gravity is a vertical force and does not affect horizontal motion. So, si vertical, remember, it's the gravity. And they are in perpendicular components of motion and are independent of each other. Okay, let's try to check our differences between horizontal motion and vertical motion. Okay, we can see there the indicators, the forces, acceleration, and velocity. Describe nato ang bawat motion in terms of forces, acceleration, and velocity. Pag sinabing forces, is it present? If present, what direction? Okay, horizontal motion, of course, there is no present of forces or force, but in vertical, yes, of course, and that is force of gravity. And remember, gravity is always in a downward direction. How about acceleration? In horizontal motion, nag-accelerate ba? Of course, no. But in vertical motion, yes, it is accelerating. And gravity is downward at 9.81 meter per second squared or 9.8 meter per second squared. It is downward acceleration. Pag sinabing velocity, is it constant or changing? Yes, very good. In horizontal motion, it is constant. Wala nag-usab. But in vertical motion, it is changing. Okay, changing by what? 9.8 meter per second each second.